I'm Kaye and I'm a late bloomer. I love growing beans. Big, beautiful seeds that fairly burst from the ground, put on a great show, and are fun to harvest. We'll look at ways to grow beans, my varieties this year, and the fun I had shelling beans with my pal Zachary. Stay tuned for this year's bean report. Sometime in the beginning of May, I stuck a few green bean seed in the raised bed. By June 12th, I had built my bamboo teepee trellis for pole beans at the end of my parkway. Charles at Old Alabama Gardener Channel had sent me rattlesnake pole beans, and I planted them at the base of each pole. Copious green southern stink bug nymphs migrated over to the green beans, which we repeatedly hand-picked off. Nevertheless, I managed a nice small first harvest of green and yellow beans mid-June, which we devoured. For lack of available space, I invested little in bush beans this year, but the beans I harvested were delicious. By the end of June, I had a few plants popping up at the base of the bamboo teepee trellis. Meanwhile, after I harvested the all-purple potatoes, I planted black turtle beans in the raised bed out back. By the end of July, I was so glad I had decided to plant pole beans. The teepee trellis was absolutely covered with rattlesnake pole bean vines. Calendula that I had started from seed was blooming at the base. I noticed some damage on leaves at the top, but I wasn't too worried because the vines looked so healthy and the pink blooms were gorgeous. I should have worried. Quite literally 24 hours later, the vines looked like this, and I caught the culprits red-handed in the act. Goldfinches. They destroyed the bean leaves just like they had done to my sunflower and Jerusalem artichoke leaves last year. 3 days later, I managed to get it covered with bird netting, but quite a bit of damage was done. I harvested one of my last handfuls of green beans on August 10th. Late in July, I had emptied the greenstock vertical planters and fluffed up the soil and planted both in Henderson baby lima beans. By August 19th, the planters were loaded and the lima beans were blooming. Out front, the bird netting had arrested destruction of the rattlesnake pole beans, but this grasshopper was locked in rather than out. September 8th, I harvested the last handful of green beans along with the first handful of rattlesnake pole beans. A week later, I was a little tired of the unsightly trellis, and Eric, my garden helper, and I harvested the beans and cleaned it all off. Later that morning, I fell on my wrist in the garden. So my garden pal Zachary came over 2 days in a row to help me shell the beans. There were a few beans I took from the vines before they were dried. I shelled them 3 days later. Such a pretty bean. Spots form as they start to dry out. The black bean pods were looking good in the raised bed by September 20th. Zachary was back over on October 2nd to check on the status of the black turtle beans. What are we going to do?
We're going to shell the bean.
Get a bean. Find a bean.
Like that?
Yeah, pull it off. Okay.
Shell it?
Yeah, go ahead. I saw Zachary a couple of times over the next 10 days, and he kept asking me when would the beans be ready to shell. October the 12th, he was back. That's all of them, yeah, right there.
This is a whole vine?
Well, they weren't on a vine, they were on bushes. How many do they usually have? Let's count. Look. How many?
7.
Let's try again. No, you're right.
Oh,
You're right and I'm wrong. I thought it was 6. 7.
3 or 4.
Oh, that's good. Awesome. Thank you for your help.
Welcome.
There was one other bean I grew this summer, and that's the Philippine cowpea. I only had about 6 or 8 seeds and planted them in and beside my raised bed after the green beans came out. They started off great and looked promising the day I planted cool season seeds all around them, and I was still confident mid-October. But something attacked them after the first harvest, and the vines went steadily downhill till the leaves yellowed and the tops of the vines dried out. I have every intention of trying again next year with the few seeds I saved, because the few seeds I ate were mighty tasty. The great thing about beans is they're a legume, and legumes put nitrogen back into the soil. So your bed is ready for the next thing going in. Here are my black turtle beans. It's about one big pot. Here are what's left of my rattlesnake pole beans. I had about this much more, about 3 pounds. And here are my baby lima beans. Not a lot, but I'm gonna get Zachary over here to help me shell these because he enjoys it. Oh, if you have foolproof bean varieties you want to recommend, please leave a comment below. I welcome all your comments. You know, as long as they're constructive or complimentary, encouraging.
I'd rather chocolate better than lima.
You'd rather have chocolate over lima beans? Yeah, I think I had too. I think we should put shelling beans on your resume. You're very good. If you enjoyed this episode, please give me a thumbs up and share with a friend. I'm Kaye, I'm a late bloomer. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Where are you? Grief. Sounds like a missile going off to the space station or something. I love that bird. Do it again, please. Sing. Wow, look, it's bright. Don't look up there. It makes my head hurt.